The delivery room was filled with tension. Nneka had been in labor for hours, her screams piercing the air, as Obiora paced outside the room, his fist clenched. He had prayed for this moment for years. 3 sons had come before, but none of them had satisfied the deep longing in his heart. He needed a daughter. Then, suddenly, the cry of a newborn filled the air. "It's a girl," the doctor announced. Obiora rushed in, his heart pounding. When he saw the tiny, wrinkled bundle in Nneka's arms, he felt something he had never felt before. Overcome with emotion, he took the baby gently and whispered, "My new wife." The nurses chuckled, thinking it was the playful words of a proud father. But for Obiora, it was something deeper. This child was different. She was special. And so, the joke remained. It became her identity even before she could even speak.
You are welcome to my channel. Do well to subscribe, comment, like and share. Thank you. Now, let's go back to the story.
Obiora was a well-known businessman in Lagos, running a successful import and export company. At 48, he had built a name for himself as a smart entrepreneur who valued discipline and order. He was respected in the community, feared by his competitors, and admired by many for his relentless ambition. His wife, Nneka, had been with him since he was a struggling trader in Onitsha. She was a quiet woman in her early 40s, devoted to her family but often overshadowed by her husband's towering presence. She had given birth to 3 sons before Adanna arrived. Ikenna, the eldest at 21, had taken over part of the business. The twins, Obinna and Tebena, were 18 and studying in university. Despite having 3 strong sons, Obiora always felt that something was missing. He longed for a daughter, someone delicate and different, someone who would truly belong to him. When Adanna was born, he saw her as the fulfillment of that void. She was not just his child, she was his everything. And from the moment she could understand words, he made sure she knew it. Adanna grew up hearing those words every day. "My wife, come here. My wife, let me carry you. My wife, you are the most beautiful girl in the world." At first, it was harmless. Just an affectionate nickname from a father who adored his only daughter. But over time, it became something more. While other girls idolized celebrities or teachers, Adanna only wanted to be like her father. She sought his approval in everything, mimicked his mannerisms, and clung to him whenever he was home. Her father encouraged it. He would take her on exclusive business trips, leaving his sons behind. He let her sit on his lap even as she grew older. His affection for her was unlike anything he had ever shown to her mother or her brothers. And everyone noticed. From the moment she could walk, Adanna was always at her father's side. He carried her everywhere, even when she was too big to be carried. When he came home from work, he would scoop her up, place her on his lap, and let her eat from his plate. "Why should my wife eat alone?" he would joke. As a child, she thought nothing of it. It was their routine. He took her to school every morning, and she refused to sleep until he came home. Even when she got older, he kissed her forehead every night and called her "my wife" before tucking her in. It was normal. But as she grew up, the emotions inside her shifted. By the time Adanna was 16, she realized her feelings for her father were different. It was not just admiration or love, it was something deeper. When she saw her father with her mother, she felt jealous. When he went on long business trips, she felt lonely in a way she couldn't explain. And when he held her, something inside her longed for more. Her father never said anything inappropriate. He never crossed the line. But his presence, his attention, and his special treatment planted something in her heart that she couldn't shake. One evening, she sat beside him at dinner and reached for his hand. "Daddy, you love me more than anyone else, right?" He smiled. "Of course, my wife." Her heart swelled. That night, she dreamt of a future where it was just the two of them. Adanna began dressing in ways she thought would please her father, cooking his favorite meals, waiting for him like a devoted wife. When a boy at school asked her out, she laughed. "I will never love another man." Her friends noticed. Flora, her best friend, tried to reason with her. "Adanna, this isn't right. Your father is your father." Adanna scoffed. "You don't understand. He loves me more than anyone else. More than my mother." Flora felt sick. "You have to stop this." But Adanna didn't listen. And the family could no longer ignore it. Nneka watched her daughter carefully, her heart heavy. She had spent years in silence, hoping she would grow out of this unnatural attachment. But now, it was clear, her daughter was lost in a dangerous delusion. One evening, after dinner, Nneka turned to her husband. "Obiora, we need to talk." He sighed. "What is it?" "It's Adanna. We have failed her." Obiora frowned. "What do you mean?" "You have made her believe she belongs to you in a way no daughter should. And I allowed it by staying silent." Obiora's face darkened. "I have done nothing wrong. Then why does she reject every boy who shows interest in her? Why does she act as though I am the other woman in this house?" For the first time, Obiora had no response. The time for denial was over. The family was on the brink of collapse. As Adanna grew older, her love for her father became consuming. She sabotaged any time her mother tried to be alone with him. She wore perfumes she knew he liked, sat closer to him than necessary, and found ways to make herself indispensable in his life. When her elder brother, Ikenna, confronted her, she lashed out. "You're just jealous because Daddy loves me more than he loves you all." The words stunned the family. Her mother knew then that something had to change. Adanna started withdrawing from her classmates, refusing to interact with boys. When a boy named Daniel confessed his feelings, she told him flatly, "I belong to someone else." Word spread around school. Teachers noticed her lack of interest in socializing. Her mother noticed how she clung to her father. And finally, her brothers confronted their parents. "This isn't normal. We need to fix this." One evening, as her father sat in his study, her mother walked in. "She is in love with you," she said. Her father froze. "You made her this way. Now we have to fix it." For the first time, he realized the damage that had been done. Obiora sat in his office, staring at nothing. The weight of his wife's words crushed him. He had thought it was harmless, a father's love for his daughter. But now, he saw it clearly. He had blurred the lines. How had he let it get this far? His wife had given him a final warning, "Fix this before it ruins her forever." The whole situation got Obiora thinking, and he knew he had no choice but to look for solution. One evening, her mother called her into her room and sat her down. Nneka sat on the edge of Adanna's bed, watching her daughter carefully. "My daughter, we need to talk," her mother began softly. Adanna sighed, already defensive. "About what, Mama?" Her mother took a deep breath. "About your feelings for your father, and about love." Adanna's eyes flashed. "I love him. There's nothing wrong with that." Her mother took a deep breath. "You love him, yes. But not in the way a daughter should love her father." Adanna scoffed. "You don't understand. He loves me more than he loves you. I am special to him." Her mother's heart ached. "Adanna, your father is a man, and you are his child. His love should protect you, not consume you." For the next hour, she gently explained the difference between a father's love and a husband's love. She spoke of boundaries, of relationships, of the kind of love that nurtures but does not possess. For the first time, doubt appeared in Adanna's eyes. The conversation was just beginning, but Nneka knew she had to break the spell before it was too late. Adanna sat in silence after her mother's words. Her heart pounded in her chest. Everything inside her wanted to scream that her mother was wrong, that her love for her father was real. But something in the way Nneka looked at her made her hesitate. Adanna, her mother said softly, "Your father is not your husband. A father's love is meant to make you strong, to protect you. A husband's love is different. It is shared with choice. Your father never chose you that way, and you should never choose him." Adanna swallowed hard. The words hurt, but for the first time, they planted doubt. Had she misunderstood everything? Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't fight back. Nneka saw the small shift and knew this was just the beginning of breaking the illusion her daughter had built her whole life around. Adanna fell into confusion and rage. She felt abandoned, betrayed by the very person she had devoted her heart to. The rejection from her father, the cold distance he now kept, shattered her world. She lashed out in ways no one had seen before. At home, she became unrecognizable. The once obedient and cheerful girl turned into a storm of rebellion. She snapped at her mother, ignored her brothers, and locked herself in her room for hours. The house, once filled with her laughter and presence, now carried a suffocating silence. At school, things were no different. She withdrew from her friends, ignoring their greetings and walking past them as if they didn't exist. Her best friend, Flora, tried reaching out, but Adanna brushed her off every time. "Adanna, please talk to me," Flora pleaded one afternoon after class. "What's going on with you?" Adanna's eyes flashed with anger. "Nothing. I just don't need anyone right now. You don't have to go through this alone." Adanna scoffed. "What do you know about what I'm going through? You wouldn't understand. No one understands." Her grades dropped. Assignments went unfinished. Teachers noticed the sudden change in her behavior, but when they asked, she gave blank stares or won't response. At home, nights were the worst. She would sit by her window, staring at the moon, waiting, hoping her father would change his mind. That he would come to her, hold her, and tell her everything would go back to how it was. But he never did. One evening, out of desperation, she stormed into her parents' bedroom while they were watching TV. Her father looked up in surprise, while her mother, stuttered, turned down the volume. "Adanna," her father said nervously. "What is it?" Her chest heaved. She could barely contain her emotions. "Why are you treating me like this?" His face remained calm, but there was a hint of guilt in his eyes. "Like what?" "Like I don't matter anymore. Like you don't love me," she shouted. "You promised me I was special. You said I was your wife." Her mother's face darkened with pain, but she remained silent, allowing her father to respond. "Adanna," her father said gently, "I love you. I always have. But I was wrong. I made a mistake with how I treated you. I let things get too far. I never meant to hurt you." Tears welled in her eyes. "But I love you more than anything. More than anyone." His voice was firm but laced with sorrow. "You are my daughter, Adanna. That is the only love that should exist between us." The words hit her like a blade to the chest. She felt like she couldn't breathe. Everything she had built in her heart, every dream, came crumbling down in an instant. "No," she shook her head. "No, you don't mean that. You can't mean that." Her mother finally stepped in, placing a hand on Adanna's shoulder. "My dear, it's time you understand. The love you have for your father is not the kind of love a daughter should have. And the love he has for you should never have crossed those lines." Adanna pulled away from her mother's grip. "You're just jealous. You always have been. You never loved him the way I do." Her mother's face twisted in pain. This is not about jealousy, Adanna, this is about what is right and what is wrong. She turned to her father, one last desperate plea in her eyes. Tell her she's wrong. Tell her it's just us. Her father looked away. Go to your room, Adanna. She gasped. So that's it. You're choosing her over me. I am choosing to do what is right, he said, his voice final. Adanna's world shattered. A sob tore through her chest as she turned and ran out of the room. She slammed the door to her bedroom, locking herself inside. She collapsed onto the bed, tears soaking her pillow as the weight of rejection pressed down on her like an unbearable burden. That night, she didn't eat. She didn't sleep. For the first time in her life, she felt completely alone. Her world felt like it was collapsing. The one person she had devoted her entire heart to had suddenly pulled away, leaving her feeling abandoned, confused, and resentful. She locked herself in her room for days, refusing to eat, speak, or even acknowledge her mother's attempts to comfort her. Her mother knew she had to act quickly. Watching her daughter fall into deep sadness was too painful. It was clear that Adanna needed professional help, someone who could guide her through the emotions that had taken root in her mind and heart. Without hesitation, her mother reached out to a trusted psychologist, Dr. Chioma Okafor, a specialist in adolescent mental health and family dynamics. When her mother gently approached Adanna about seeing Dr. Chioma, she met immediate resistance. I don't need help. I need Daddy. She screamed, tears streaming down her face. You need to understand what's happening inside you, my daughter, her mother pleaded, sitting beside her. You're in pain, and you don't have to go through this alone. Adanna shook her head, not ready to listen. She still believed that her father was the only one who truly understood her, the only person who could feel the emptiness she felt inside. But no matter how much she longed for him, he had distanced himself, leaving her more lost than ever before. Days passed, and Adanna's emotional state worsened. She barely spoke, spent hours staring at the walls, and lost all interest in the things she once loved. The breaking point came when she collapsed from exhaustion and hunger. That was when she finally agreed to see Dr. Chioma. At their first session, Adanna sat silently, her arms crossed and her face expressionless. Dr. Chioma observed her with gentle patience before speaking. Adanna, I know you don't want to be here. But I'm not here to judge you. I only want to help. Adanna remained silent, her eyes fixed on the floor. She didn't trust anyone anymore. Dr. Chioma continued, her voice calm and reassuring. You love your father very much. That much is clear. But do you understand why this love feels different from what a daughter should feel? At this, Adanna's head snapped up, her eyes filled with defiance. I don't care what anyone thinks. No one understands how much he means to me. Dr. Chioma leaned forward. Then help me understand. Tell me what makes your love for him so powerful. For the first time in days, Adanna spoke openly. She poured out her heart, explaining how her father had always treated her as someone special, how he had given her attention in ways that made her feel irreplaceable. How he had called her my wife since birth and how that had shaped her entire identity. Dr. Chioma listened carefully, nodding. Your father made you feel loved, protected, and special. There's nothing wrong with wanting love, Adanna. But sometimes, the way love is presented to us can shape us in ways we don't fully understand. Tears filled Adanna's eyes. But why does it hurt so much now? Because love should never make you feel like you're losing yourself, Dr. Chioma explained gently. You're feeling this pain because the love you built your world around is now slipping away, and you don't know who you are without it. Adanna swallowed nervously. So what do I do? We take this one step at a time, Dr. Chioma said. First, we help you understand what healthy love looks like. Then, we help you find who you are beyond your father's affection. It was a long road ahead, but for the first time in her life, Adanna saw a little hope. She wasn't alone in this. She had a chance to heal. And she was ready to take the first step. Dr. Chioma sat across from Nneka and Obiora, her expression serious yet compassionate. Adanna has made progress, but she needs space to fully heal, she said firmly. The emotional ties in this house are too strong, and staying here will only make it harder for her to separate her identity from her past. Nneka's hands trembled. Are you saying she has to leave us? Dr. Chioma nodded. Not forever, but for now. A structured environment, away from these emotional triggers, will help her redefine herself. Her father remained silent, guilt heavy on his face. He had never imagined his actions would lead to this. But where will she go? Her mother whispered. I have a trusted rehabilitation center, Dr. Chioma assured them. It's not a hospital, but a place where she can receive guidance, therapy, and rebuild her emotional foundation. Tears welled in her mother's eyes, but she knew it was the right decision. If this is what she needs, then we'll do it. When Adanna was told, she resisted at first, but deep inside, she knew she couldn't heal while surrounded by the memories that bound her heart. As she packed her bags, she took one last look at her childhood home. This was not goodbye forever, but a step toward finding herself again. It was time to start over. The rehabilitation center was nothing like Adanna had imagined. It was not a cold, empty hospital but a quiet, peaceful place among trees where people could rest and heal. She felt uncertain as she walked in, holding her bag tightly. A counselor named Mrs. Amoka welcomed her with a warm smile. This is a place of healing, Adanna, she said gently. Take your time. There's no rush. Adanna struggled in the first few weeks. She missed home, her father's presence, and the sense of security she once felt. But through therapy, she slowly started to understand how misplaced her emotions had been. She joined group discussions where other young women shared their struggles, and for the first time, she didn't feel alone. Mrs. Amoka guided her through personal sessions, helping her distinguish between love, dependence, and emotional confusion. Your father was your protector, but he was never meant to be your partner, she explained. You saw love, but it was never the kind of love you truly needed. Over time, Adanna felt comfort in writing, sharing thoughts she never said out loud. Each day, she let go of her past and took steps toward a new future. It wasn't easy, but she was healing. One evening, months later, she stood by the center's garden, looking at the sunset. For the first time in years, she felt light. She was ready to rebuild, not just her life, but her understanding of love, family, and self-worth. A year had passed. Adanna stood at the entrance of her family home, a mixture of nervousness and excitement filling her heart. She had changed, grown, and finally understood the difference between love and dependency. Her mother rushed forward, pulling her into a warm embrace. Welcome home, my daughter, her mother whispered, tears streaming down her face. Her father stood back, hesitant, guilt still evident in his eyes. Adanna met his gaze, and for the first time, she did not feel the same overwhelming emotions that had once consumed her. Instead, she saw him as he was, her father, imperfect but still her father. They sat together that evening, talking openly for the first time. Her father apologized sincerely, acknowledging his past mistakes. I never meant to hurt you, Adanna, I should have known better. She nodded. I understand now. And I forgive you. It wasn't easy, but it was a start. With time, their family found a new balance. Adanna enrolled in university, focusing on psychology, determined to help others who had been confused about love, just as she once was. She built friendships, experienced real love in its healthy form, and learned to see her father's love for what it truly was, parental, protective, and not meant to be anything more. Her journey had been painful, but in the end, she found herself. She had reclaimed her life, her identity, and her future. And for the first time, she was truly free.